Hi, thanks for clicking on my video. It's kind of a long video, and I know, and you may not want to hear everything that I have to say about MERS. So I actually made a list of the topics that I talk about in groupings, so you can find that on the side. If you click on it, then it'll take you to that part of the video. That way you don't have to watch me talk for so long. However, I suggest that you do. I'm just saying, I spent a lot of time researching MERS, so, it'd be nice if you heard me out. Hi world, Danielle here. As you know, I live in South Korea, and I have this video blog to document my life while I'm here. And today, that means talking about MERS, and in particular the MERS outbreak that has been ongoing in the country for the past 2+ weeks. Why I want to talk about this? Well, mostly because up until very recently, up until a few days ago actually, I found myself really not knowing what was going on. Basically, I was just really frustrated. I couldn't find any information that I actually wanted to know. So instead of getting frustrated, I just did my own research. I went to the websites of international health organizations and I looked at the information that they had. I read through risk assessments, I looked at scientific journals, and I compiled that information. And today, I'm going to present it to you. MERS is a virus. Actually, the full name is Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus. So you might see it sometimes that it's referred to as MERS-CoV, not just MERS. Here we're just going to call it MERS because it's shorter. Basically what it is, it's a virus that affects your respiratory system, and it originated from the Middle East. The coronavirus part of it is actually the family of this virus. It's called like that because there's little spikes on the surfaces of the virus that I guess kind of look like a crown. And I guess some scientist somewhere got whimsical and decided to call it coronavirus. Some of the symptoms associated with a MERS infection include high fever, shortness of breath, coughing. Some other symptoms might be body aches, diarrhea, sneezing, runny nose. And if I'm listing these off and it sounds like a worse version of a common cold, then I guess you're not too far off. MERS and the common cold, which are many types of viruses, are all part of the same coronavirus family. However, MERS is not just the common cold. Just because they're similar and they're in the same virus family, it does not mean that they're the same thing. Even though MERS is in the same family as the viruses that cause the common cold, it's not a human virus. It's actually an animal virus. It's believed to be originated from bats that then infect camels. Humans become infected when they come into contact with camels that are infected or camel products that have the virus. So that's how it spreads to humans. However, once a human has it, spreading to another person is actually quite difficult. So person-to-person spread is not quite as easy as you will believe, especially when you compare it to a common cold. And this is a really big thing, because I know that people that do know about the connection between MERS and the common cold are really scared about how potentially contagious it could be, and that's really not the case. And I'm going to explain to you why. First, let's just put a little aside there. The first case of MERS was only really discovered in 2012, and 3 years really isn't enough time for the science to really produce as many results as one would like when it comes to understanding virus outbreaks. So unfortunately, there's actually not that much information about how MERS gets transmitted from one person to another, but because it is part of the coronavirus family, it's believed that it probably shares a very similar pathway as other coronaviruses, which is saliva and mucus. So coming in contact with the saliva and mucus of someone that's been infected and therefore getting infected yourself. The difference though is that the other viruses, and again we're talking about the viruses that give the common cold, you can catch it just by kind of breathing in the same air as someone that's sick. But that's not the case for MERS. It's been studied and found that simple coughing isn't enough to actually spread the disease to other people. So airborne spread of MERS is actually very unlikely. The exception to this is hospitals. In hospitals, MERS can be transmitted through the air. Why? Well, mostly because there's medical procedures in hospitals that can lead to the MERS virus becoming airborne as an aerosol. Again, I need to say this again, this is only in hospitals. Even within the home, the cases of one person spreading MERS to a family member in the same home are very small. It does happen, but it is rare. You basically need to be like very close contact with the person for the virus to spread to you, unless you're in a hospital setting. Again, the exception is the hospital. And I keep saying this because it's really important, because that's really how the virus is transmitted between humans, especially here in South Korea. All the cases of diagnosed individuals in South Korea, every single one of them up until now has gotten the virus in a hospital setting. One person traveled to the Middle East, came back to South Korea, infected, but not showing symptoms yet, and then later went to go get treatment at hospitals, and it wasn't until May 20th that he was diagnosed with MERS. That means that he spent almost 10 days visiting different medical facilities without really knowing what he had, and therefore not taking the necessary precautions, which led to the really fast transfer of the virus in the beginning stages. Until he was diagnosed with MERS, there was absolutely no reason to believe that he had MERS, because MERS is not a South Korean virus, but he had it and he spread it. And it was only after that he was diagnosed that then the medical facilities began to take the necessary precautions. That means that the people that were first affected by the virus were people that were in the medical facilities that he was getting treated. Health practitioners, other patients, visitors, even some family members. And then from then, the spread continued. And because it spreads like this, it kind of has waves, where some people don't infect anyone at all, and other people might infect a lot of people if the hospital didn't take the necessary precautions. So we kind of have these waves of people getting infected and then showing symptoms and then going to get treated and potentially then infecting other people. In total, today, June 13th, there has been 138 people that have been confirmed to have MERS. Of those people, 14 have died. That number continues to increase every day. There's a few more cases of people diagnosed with MERS and unfortunately deaths associated. Thankfully, it seems like, considering South Korea is such a densely populated country, the outbreak isn't spreading that quickly, again, because it is only isolated to hospital incidents. Now, most people that die from MERS actually die of complications associated to having this infection. That means that probably they were elderly, so they already had kind of a compromised immune system, or they had a different disease or disorder that then got worse once they contracted MERS. Like I've mentioned, in South Korea, only 14 people have died up until this point, which is still a larger number than it should be, but it does mean that less than 10% of the people that have been diagnosed with MERS have actually died from it. It's still a large percentage, but when you compare it to the death rate in the Middle East, which is closer to 30 to 40%, it's not quite that large. And that's pretty good news. The really big difference between the two death rates, like less than 10% to 30 to 40%, is basically, well, one, South Korea has excellent health care. So dying of complications can be limited because those complications can actually be treated. And second is that the way that the disease is transmitted, it's actually been studied that the primary cases of MERS infections usually show much worse symptoms than the secondary cases. These secondary cases show milder symptoms, so it doesn't really affect them as much. And in South Korea, basically all diagnosed people are secondary cases. This was a harder question to answer. The truth is, no one knows. It was originally hoped that the outbreak would come into fairly quick control because the spread is isolated to hospitals. So as long as hospitals continue to take the necessary precautions, the outbreak should eventually come under control. But maybe as of today, people haven't been as confident anymore. June 12th was the end of the incubation period for like the latest wave of infected people. So it was expected that the number of cases were going to peak before June 12th, but then after June 12th, that number would go down. And then today happened and 12 more people were diagnosed, which is much higher number for like a daily rate than the past few days. So people are worrying that maybe there's going to be like another wave of infected people coming in now, which does mean that perhaps getting this outbreak into control is going to be a little bit more of a long drawn out process than originally hoped for. Some final thoughts. Well, there's no reason for the schools to be closed. So if you are a teacher in South Korea and your school is closed, they shouldn't be. I'm just saying, there's no reason, as long as people are washing their hands and avoiding touching their eyes, really there's nothing else that they should do when they're out in public. If you're in a hospital, it's a different situation, but if you want to wear your mask in public because it makes you feel better, go ahead, but again, it's not how MRSA is spreading. And yeah, just, you know, go about your everyday life. Things will come back to normal soon, and until then, just, you know, use this newfound information that you have to make the right choices.